Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is interpret. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we can use this verb. The first way you have likely heard the verb interpret used is to mean to translate orally or into sign language the words of a person speaking a different language. So if you happen to be in the United States now, and at any point during the pandemic you've tuned into a news conference, you might have seen a person translating the words from the speaker, and that speaker, sometimes it's the governor or a doctor or other public health official, and they try and communicate that language for people who are unable to hear. Sometimes these conferences are also interpreted into different languages. It's very common for Spanish, for example, to be a second language in which the information is shared. A second way you might hear the verb interpret used is to mean to explain the meaning of some information or a text. So this particular usage is something you might hear in class or as part of a test question, right? So if you are asked to interpret a document, right, it might be that your teacher or the test maker is asking you to explain something. A third way you might hear the verb interpret used is to mean to understand an action as having a particular meaning or significance. So this is pretty close to that second definition, but now we're looking at someone's behavior, their actions, and trying to determine the meaning or significance of those actions. A fourth way you might hear the verb interpret used is to mean to perform something in a particular way that conveys one's understanding of the creator's ideas. So this usage might get used in regards to music or plays, other drama and performative art types of things. So we might talk about how the actors are interpreting the script. So again, the person who wrote or created the piece, how they think these characters act and how they might feel in a particular situation. You should know that interpret is a regular verb. If I want to make interpret progressive, all I need to do is add an ing to form interpreting. The past tense and participle forms of this verb are made by adding ed. The base verb interpret ends with a T sound, so our ed is going to make an id sound. Interpreted, interpreted. Hopefully you can hear that extra syllable on the end. You'll be happy to know I don't have any additional meanings or usages from phrasal verbs, so that's going to allow us to focus on using our verb of the day in the simple past tense, the present progressive, and the simple future. Let's start with the simple past tense. Remember, we're using this verb tense to talk about an action that occurred at some definite time in the past, and the action is completed. It is not continuing on into the present. So, if I'm going to make an affirmative sentence in the simple past tense, I'm going to use that ed form of the verb. This is true no matter what my subject is. Let's take a look at an example sentence. He interpreted his dream to mean that he needs to rethink his professional choices. So many people try and look for significance in the things that they dream about at night. So either the topics or what happened. And in this particular sentence, someone thought about what he dreamt and came away with this new understanding. If I want to make a negative simple past tense sentence, I'm going to use did not and then the base verb. So in the negative, we're not using this ed form of the verb. Let's look at another example sentence. The patient didn't interpret her symptoms as COVID-19. And this is a sentence I've seen mentioned in a few different news articles because it's really hard to know whether someone has this virus or not. There are so many symptoms, and the symptoms can be a little different for other people. So there are some people who have allergies at a particular time during the year. So during that time, if they are a little sniffly, they think, oh, it's my allergies. Maybe it's not this virus, but sometimes it has been the virus. Now let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple past tense. We're going to start with did, then we'll have our subject, and then the base verb. Here's another example. Did someone interpret for them during the doctor's appointment? So here we're asking if we had another person who maybe speaks the patient's language and help with that communication. Now let's take a look at the present progressive. We use this verb tense to talk about an action that is happening right now or an action that is in progress, so one that is not completed yet. To make this verb tense, I need to use a present form of be, that's am, is, or are, and then I'll use the ing form of the verb. Let's take a look at an affirmative example. She is interpreting for the parents as they meet with their children's teachers. So again, this goes back to that first definition we talked about earlier in this video about communicating some information in one language and changing it to a second language. If I want to make a negative present progressive sentence, I'm just going to insert not after my be verb right before the ing form of the verb. Here's another example. The actors aren't interpreting the lines of another writer for their character. They are the writers. So again, this goes back to the fourth definition when we're talking about how someone is performing a particular work of art. If I want to ask a yes or no question in the present progressive, I'm going to start with my present form of be, again, am, is, or are. Then I'll have my subject, then the ing form of the verb. Are the government officials interpreting the new data? So here, are they looking for a particular meaning? Are they trying to better understand the information? Now let's take a look at the simple future. Today, as we practice simple future sentences, we're going to use will and the base verb. This is one of many ways to communicate a future idea. We tend to use this with offers and promises, sometimes with predictions as well. And the nice thing about using will to express the future is it's going to stay the same no matter what the subject is. We're just going to have will and our base verb. Let's take a look at a sentence. The court will interpret the new statute. So this comes from an article I was reading talking about the Supreme Court and the fact that there is a new law that people debate the meaning. How should someone be treated under this particular law? So we're going to ask our justices to find that meaning and make it clear for everyone else. If I want to make a negative simple future sentence, I'm going to insert not after will. Now, you might hear native English speakers use the contraction for will not. That's won't, W-O-N apostrophe T. And that's what I'm using in this example. We won't interpret the lack of a handshake as rudeness. So this goes back to that idea of looking at someone's behavior and looking for significance or meaning. So previously, pre-pandemic, it might have been rude in some instances not to shake someone's hand. But now, right, during the pandemic, when we want to stay far away from one another, not touch people with whom we're not living, right? So no longer will this be interpreted, the significance, the meaning behind it. We're not going to think it's rude. We think you're watching out for your health. Finally, let's make a yes or no question in the simple future. We'll start with will, then we'll have our subject, then the base verb. Here is an example. Will students interpret the information correctly for the assignment? So here we're using this to make a prediction. Now let's take a look at two words that are related to our verb of the day, interpret. The first word we're going to look at is the noun interpretation. Just like our verb, this noun can also have a couple different meanings. It could be an explanation or a way of explaining something. Here is an example of this usage in a sentence. Her behavior is open to a number of interpretations. So here, there are many different explanations possible to help us understand someone's behavior. Why is she acting this way? Could be A, could be B, could be C. A second way to use this noun interpretation is a stylistic representation of a creative work or a dramatic role. So again, this ties back to that fourth definition of the verb we looked at earlier. Let's take a look at this usage in a sentence. The conductor had a very unique interpretation of the piece of music. So remember, we said this just isn't for plays or other kind of dramatic works. This can apply to music as well. And so maybe how fast the musicians played the piece of music or how loud they were at certain points during the piece could have been very different than how others have interpreted it. The last word we're going to look at today is another noun. It's interpreter. It is a person who interprets. So the focus here is going to tie back to our first definition of the verb. So being able to communicate in another language. So again, this is generally done orally, so or verbally, another way to think about it. So with speaking, with our words. This can very much be a profession too. I'll point that out as well. So let's take a look at an example of this noun in a sentence. The organization is hiring a Chin and Burmese interpreter. So here, in this example sentence, maybe it's a nonprofit or a company is hiring someone who is able to speak these two languages and who can communicate that information, likely in English, to others. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.